Hey everyone, welcome to the Reality Check. My name is Rob. This is going to be my hopefully weekly podcast about everything WWE. Definitely been a fan of the WWE for the past 20 plus years. One of my favorite events of all time was WrestleMania 10. It was actually the first event that I can distinctly remember seeing. Definitely loved it. Probably wore out two video cassettes of it that my grandma had to repurchase for the local video store. But hey, it was worth it. It was good times. Today on the podcast, we're going to cover the Cruiserweight Classic as well as the big news here in WWE, the brand extension draft. So let's get on into it. Okay, so let's talk Cruiserweight Classic. Last week we saw the first episode of the Cruiserweight Classic. The second just recently aired by the time this podcast will air. So let's talk about the first 8 matches in the Classic. In the first match, we had Gran Metalik go over Alejandro Saez via Fishman Buster. Ho Ho Lun went over Arya Davari via a German suplex. Cedric Alexander went over Clement Patois via lumbar check. And Kota Ibushi, one of the favorites to win the entire Cruiserweight Classic, went over Sean Maluta via sit-out last ride powerbomb, his personal preferred finisher. All the matches were very well done. I do believe that there is a lot of talent in here, even the ones that aren't going to make it beyond this first round. I believe that we will probably see some of them again, especially with Raw just recently announcing that it would have its own exclusive Cruiserweight division. Again, as I already mentioned, by the time this podcast airs, Week 2 will have aired on the WWE Network. So let's run over those results real quick as well, too. According to the match layout for tonight, there are, again, 4 matches. We had Tajiri versus Damian Slater. Tajiri will go over via a buzzsaw kick. Nice to see Tajiri back in the WWE ring. He was definitely one of my favorites back in the day. TJ Perkins will face off against Damak, and TJ will win via the figure 4 deathlock, which is one of his preferred finishing maneuvers. Lince Dorado will go over Mustafa Ali via a shooting star press. And Akira Tozawa will go over Kenneth Johnson via the deadlift German suplex. From what I have read, all those matches, again, very well done. Surprised at some of the pairings. I believe that Damak seemed to be getting a lot of hype around him via WWE's social media, the website itself, tweets, that kind of thing. I was surprised that he would be eliminated in the first round, but that doesn't necessarily mean anything. Again, as I mentioned, a lot of these superstars in the Cruiserweight Classic, we will probably see them again, to the extent of there's a lot of rumor going around right now. Gran Metalik and Kota Ibushi have already signed contracts with WWE, rumored to be NXT type deals. So they could end up in NXT. They might also end up directly on the main roster in the Cruiserweight division, because obviously being in the Cruiserweight Classic, that makes the most sense for them. Other people that I do expected to get signed out of the Cruiserweight Classic very easy. I do believe Zack Sabre Jr., who's my personal overall favorite to win the Cruiserweight Classic, I would be willing to bet that he'll be signed to a contract. Jack Gallagher is also one I believe will be signed. Michael G., listener of the podcast, that's his personal favorite to win. I do also see Cedric Alexander being signed. His match was excellent. He's got a great look to him. Killer finisher, in my opinion. Listener Eric M. Believes that Cedric Alexander will go all the way to win. Noam Dar, Lindsay Dorado, and Sean Maluda, I also believe, are going to be ones that will be signed very shortly after the Cruiserweight Classic has concluded. One of the ones I already mentioned about being signed, Kota Ibushi. I believe that he will face off against Zack Sabre Jr. in the finals. And if you look at the bracket, very easy to happen as they are on opposite sides of the bracket. Veronica believes that Kota Ibushi will go ahead and win the whole thing. I have to disagree. Looking on beyond the tournament, again, now that Raw has decided that they are going to have their own exclusive cruiserweight division, it definitely makes things very interesting because there are 32 competitors in the tournament and there have been multiple alternates for those who can't make weight. If I remember correctly, there was one competitor who did not make weight prior to the start of the tournament and he had to be replaced. And WWE.com did have an article up showcasing the 3 alternates in case anyone didn't make weight for future recordings of the Cruiserweight Classic show. Cruiserweight Classic, definitely entertaining so far. I'd like to see this definitely become a yearly event. I'm really hoping that the Cruiserweight division on Raw will pan out to be able to do that, as well as maybe bring back the Cruiserweight title as well, too. But we'll see in the future, I suppose. Okay, so let's talk the brand split a little bit. Obviously, we have Stephanie McMahon as the commissioner of Raw. Mick Foley was chosen as her general manager. And then Shane McMahon as the commissioner of SmackDown. And he chose Daniel Bryan as his general manager. Both smart picks, in my opinion. I believe that the dynamic between Stephanie and Mick Foley will make things interesting on Raw, as Stephanie tends to portray a heel where Mick usually portrays the face. With Shane and Daniel Bryan, they will most likely both play face characters, so it should be fairly interesting to see how that goes as well too, although it might make things a little less interesting. As announced on Monday, Raw will have its own exclusive Cruiserweight division. This part is awesome here, especially considering we just talked about the Cruiserweight Classic a little bit ago. Not many details have been introduced yet, but I'm assuming that it will have its own Cruiserweight title, so that will probably be coming back. And we will see a lot of the Cruiserweight Classic competitors be brought on as full talents to help fulfill that. In NXT news, there were 6 call-ups, of course, during the brand split draft. The first one, not surprising at all, Finn Balor. Finn was chosen number 5th overall. This is not surprising, again, as Finn Balor is a mainstay in NXT, has been for quite a while now. It's been well overdue, in my opinion, for him to come to the main roster, but I'm going to assume that probably Triple H wanted to try to hold on to him for the NXT brand as long as possible. The second NXT pick was American Alpha. That's Jason Jordan and Chad Gable. Great pick for the tag team division on SmackDown. Still should be interesting to see where they go with them, as their title reign on NXT was kind of short-lived, and the SmackDown side does not currently have its own tag team championship. Again, they really haven't detailed a whole lot about what is going on with the titles. Are the tag team, WWE, and women's titles moving back and forth between shows, or will they remain exclusive? We don't know yet. The surprising announcement came from Nia Jax being called up to Monday Night Raw. Nia is talented, got a great look to her. Of course, sometimes it is all about who you know, as she is related to The Rock. She's his cousin. That could have had an impact on her call-up. I'd like to think it doesn't. I'd like to think that they need that monster female role, and Nia Jax definitely fills that. Those 3 were done on television during the SmackDown Live broadcast. The other 3 were done during the supplemental draft on the WWE Network, with Mojo Rawley, Alexa Bliss, and Carmella all being called up to SmackDown. Mojo is... All 3 of them have talent. Let me start off by saying that. I would not have chose these three personally to call up, but I'm sure they have their reasons. Mojo will make sense in a certain respect because Zack Ryder is on SmackDown. As you may or may not know, they have a tag team known as the Hype Bros. They could continue doing that on SmackDown to help bolster the overall tag team division. Alexa Bliss, again, talented, very athletic. I feel like she could use more wrestling training before coming up to the main roster, but maybe they see something that I don't. Who knows? Anyways, it's nice that we have another Ohioan on the main roster. Carmella. If you saw the Breaking Ground Reloaded special, when Triple H was talking to Enzo and Cass about their call-up, that they would be going up to the main roster and Carmella would not be following them, that he believes she can become a big star, but she needs to do it in her own right. I'm assuming this is the continuation and the overall plan that he had. Enzo and Cass were drafted to Raw. She was drafted to SmackDown. And again, it's a little bit of a weird choice because with SmackDown, they do not have the Women's Championship. And unless that championship is going to go back and forth, what really are the women going to be responsible for on SmackDown? That goes the same for Alexa, who was brought up. We got Becky Lynch and Natalya, who are also both drafted to SmackDown as well. Same with Naomi. Without a title of their own to go after, it leads me to be less excited for the women's division. And it already is difficult to get excited about the women's division anyways, because you have some really great superstars and you have some lackluster ones. But who knows? We will see. One thing I definitely really liked from the draft, the number one pick overall, was Seth Rollins. I feel like that really shows WWE's investment into the man, that they believe that he can become the next John Cena, Stone Cold, The Rock. He's the guy that will be able to transcend this next era or generation and become a household name, which I like because I've been a fan of Seth Rollins for quite some time now. With the Wyatt family, Bray Wyatt and Eric Rowan were drafted to SmackDown. Braun Strowman going to Raw. Should be very interesting to see how they go with here. Not so much on the Bray and Eric Rowan portion, but on the Braun Strowman portion. He's never been handed a mic. To my recollection, he's never even said a word in any promo for anything. Bray Wyatt pretty much was the microphone of the group. He is an impressive specimen in terms of size and strength. So we'll see what that'll do for him, I suppose. The last thing I really want to draw attention to is the last thing that happened during the draft. Heath Slater. The other two members of the Social Outcasts were both drafted. If I remember correctly, they were both drafted to Raw. Yes, in the very late rounds of the draft. But Heath Slater wasn't drafted to either show. Now, I believe that they're going to do a storyline here, which is great because I believe Heath Slater is definitely an underrated wrestler. So we'll have to see what they decide to do, but WWE's social networks did make specific mention of the fact that Heath Slater was the only member of the WWE roster not drafted to either show. You can't put those photographs out with those captions all over your social media pages and not have something planned for it. So we may be getting to see a whole lot more of Heath Slater, and in my opinion, that's not a bad thing. But at least that's my take on the draft overall. There were a couple other interesting portions of the draft, but for the most part, the draft was mildly lackluster. There were no surprise returns. I was hoping that we'd get to see some old superstars coming back that, you know, the general managers had signed to new contracts or something of that nature. But maybe they'll just save those for as the shows start to go on. And that's the end of the reality check. Thanks for tuning in. We'll be back next week with a new host. We have someone else joining us. Going to do a little bit of back and forth. Should make things a little bit more interesting to get someone else's perspective on things as well too. And if you have something that you'd like us to talk about, let us know in the comments below. If you think there's something I could do better in, let me know in the comments below. Main thing, check us out on Facebook, like us, share with your friends. And lastly, one very special thank you to the person in my life who really nurtured my love of wrestling when a lot of people didn't. A lot of people did, but a lot of people didn't really they didn't care. I'd just like to say thank you to Uncle Bill. He's not with us anymore, but I hope he knows how much we love him and how much we miss him. So thank you again.